Welcome, everyone, to the December Entrepreneur Speaker Series. My name is Mike Panessis. I'm the Executive Director of Cal Lutheran Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. This is our monthly presentation / talk with an entrepreneur to learn about their personal experience, what their ups and downs have been, and to learn a little bit and to get a chance to network with each other. Today's speaker is Johnny Fayad of Eat Your Coffee or Eat My Coffee?
Eat Your Coffee. Yeah.
Your coffee.
Not mine, yours.
So one of when you do a speaker series long enough, one thing you can prepare yourself for is the constructive criticism from listeners who tell you need to do more of this, you're not doing enough of that, and we take those seriously and we adjust accordingly. So we've heard over the years that we want to hear from more women, and we've done that. More people of color, and we're doing that as well. But the one we probably hear the most is, dude, the average age of your speakers is like 50. And I'm like a college student. I want to hear people my age tell me stories about their experiences that I can identify with now. And I think Johnny fits that bill today very well. And I'm going to introduce him in a second. But for our students who are in this session, we tell you all the time, there is no minimum age to be an entrepreneur. And Johnny is a great example of that and has a really inspirational story to tell. We're going to do this one in a conversational style. I'm also learning when we have millennials on this, they don't do PowerPoint. They're happy to just talk about their experience. And so Johnny's going to talk a little bit, and then we're going to have a conversation, and we invite you to join in and ask questions. You can either ask questions in the chat box, or you can raise your hand in Slack, and we'll call on you and ask you to unmute yourself and talk to Johnny directly. I would ask you while we're speaking to make sure that your microphone is muted. It's up to you to decide whether you want to have your screen on or not. But before we get to Johnny, we always do the same thing at these sessions. We give everyone an opportunity in the audience. These are about community and about us knowing what's going on in the community and knowing what kind of help there is in the community. So what we do first is we give people who are in the session an opportunity to do an elevator pitch. 1 minute. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what startup you're working on, what help you need, and if you're not working on a startup, what you do for a living and how you can help startups. So try to keep it to a minute. I don't have my timer on. I don't want to have to bring my timer out. I am the host, so I can mute you whenever I want. But with it ending on a threat, who would like to do an elevator pitch? How about Michael, can I volunteer you? Because I would love for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself, your Cal Lutheran connection, and your company.
Yes, I'm Michael Adeno, graduated in 1994, Cal Lutheran, majoring in marketing and advertising, double major, and international business minor. Long story short, I'm the third generation coffee in the coffee business, mostly on the growing end from Ethiopia. And we have award-winning specialty coffee business right now in the United States. In Ethiopia, we support as of last month, we support over 10,000 farmers with their livelihoods and with any assistance that they need, be it from farming techniques or how to have a wonderful life, how to lead their life successfully, manage their money, and what have you. And we're honored to receive multiple awards over the year. And I'm also honored by CLU to being the Entrepreneur of the Year in 2017. And it's a great honor to meet all of you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else?
I can go, Mike. This is Garo.
Go.
Yeah, and I actually have my son next to me, Suren, who's very interested in entrepreneurship and is a student.
Yes, Suren is my student at Oaks.
Yeah.
Hi, Suren.
Hi. Yeah, he's actually been thinking about doing sports bars for a while, and I thought this would be very good, interesting talk for him. But on my side, I was a corporate executive, public company executive officer in technology, 30+ year career, retired a year and a half ago, and then started doing really interesting stuff in the last year and a half. I ended up starting a company in water submetering for apartments. That's going very well. Did the SAFE round and did a seed round a couple of months ago. And also with a few executive colleagues, we a month and a half ago launched a SPAC, went public on NASDAQ, and we are in the process of looking for an acquisition there. SPAC's a blank check company. I don't know. It's pretty trendy these days. So
I was just talking to someone about SPACs. It is very trendy.
yeah, I mean, we didn't realize when we were planning it how hot it was going to get.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting because we're talking every day to 2-3 companies who are looking to sell. You know, they build it to $50, $100, $200 million from start and looking to go to sell the business, go public.
And what's the name of your startup?
My startup is Dune Labs, DUNE, and the SPAC is Motion Acquisition. It's traded on NASDAQ under MOTN.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, I just saw Evan Brandt. Evan, are you willing to come on and tell us a little bit about Vidiums? You're used to pitching. You've pitched oh wait, did he disappear? Maybe not.
I just muted.
I'm here, Mike.
There you are. Hey.
Anything for you.
Excellent. Tell us about video. You're used to you know the drill.
I know the drill. Hello, everyone. My name's Evan. My company is Vidiums. We produce high-end videos for commercial real estate, either in the marketing format or the presentation format. We focus on infusing data into a storytelling format. So we use 3D satellite footage and drone footage to visualize data about commercial assets. So whether the property be for sale, for lease, an investment syndication, and we've done pretty much any format presentation you could think of, internal presentations to committees for real estate. We've done things where we're visualizing data about environmental projects. We've done presentations for cities. So just about anything you think of as far as visualizing data about a commercial asset, specifically commercial, we produce what we call a Vidium, a video offering memorandum for that.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely happy to be here.
Anyone else want to pitch? Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for those of you who introduced yourselves.
Mike, can I share how we met Johnny in the first place?
I'll jump in after you.
Oh, Jeff. No, Jeff, go for it.
So, hey, everybody. I graduated in 2010 with an MPPA from Cal Lutheran. I'm starting my business with, I roast single farm specialty roasted coffee. I'm selling at farmers markets and really wanted to learn from the group how some people got started in getting into a warehouse space, like a commercial space, like a food approved facility. I'm having a lot of trouble getting into the next growth of my business, putting a bigger roaster in a commercial space with all the regulations. So I was wondering if anybody had any advice, like how you found your niche to get into that small area where you can like sublease or get a decent amount of space just to afford a growing business. So if anybody has any experience with that, I would love to hear from you.
And you put your email address and your phone number in the chat window. So
I did.
if anyone can help, please give Jeff a shout.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Kristen, why don't you introduce Johnny, and then I'll come back when it's time to have a conversation.
Okay, sounds great. So I came on board at Hub 101 back in December of last year, and had 3 months under my belt before COVID hits, right? So in those first 3 months, so January, February, I was walking around the space, trying to get to know the members and whatnot, and got pretty used to seeing the same faces every day in our co-working space. And all of a sudden, I see a new face sitting on the couch in our main area on his laptop, and I walk past him. It's one of those awkward things where it's like, should I say hi? Someone I don't really recognize. So I'm like, Kristen, you manage this space. go talk to. I just muted myself instead of letting someone in. There we go. The point of having a co-working space, right, is building community. And Mike mentioned that at the beginning of this talk, that cultivating community is so important, even now, so more than ever. So I went up, started talking to Johnny, and learned he had this Eat Your Coffee startup. And that organic conversation turned into what it is now, which is being able to invite him to speak to us today. And so this is just planting a seed of just reminding everyone how useful and important it is to reach out and make connections with people, especially now during this remote world that we live in. So welcome, Johnny. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, glad to be here and sharing my story. And I think hopefully it's helpful to some of you. And if you're thinking about a food business or even just generally my path in entrepreneurship and how I approached it with my co-founder and everything. As Mike alluded to earlier, I'm a typical millennial, try to keep these things conversational so we can just chat through it, and happy to be an open book and help you avoid mistakes we made along the way. But I'll start off with the story. If anyone wants to interrupt me on the way through with a question or something to dive deeper into something, feel free. So without further ado, the very beginning, I was a freshman at Northeastern University out in Boston. And for context, I'm originally from the Westlake Village area. I went to Agora High School and kind of grew up out here. I never really thought entrepreneurship was a career path. I always thought I would go and be a doctor. And then eventually when I told my dad I don't like blood, I'm gonna go work in finance and I'll make my money that way. And he said, fine, as long as you do well. And I said, cool. So I went to go study finance at Northeastern. There was a really strong entrepreneurship community there. And so I kind of started getting involved in that. There was something called the Husky Startup Challenge, and I was kind of intrigued. So I started going to some meetings, and then eventually kind of started to gravitate towards that group. And it made me realize that entrepreneurship might actually be something I can do, after hearing enough speakers come in and talk about it and kind of show that they've had this success. So why can't I? And I think, my C in financial accounting probably also went to that my finance career probably wasn't going to take off too well. But part of that gets into the story. So I was running late to my 8 a.m. financial accounting class, no time for breakfast and coffee. So I joked with the guy sitting next to me about eating my coffee. And we started to kind of riff on that for a bit and decided to enter it into that startup competition, the Husky Startup Challenge, as just kind of a way to see if we can win a little bit of prize money and build a product and learn something. And so we went through it. There was a boot camp process and that we went with product market fit and defining your customer and trying to figure out what the problem is you're solving. And we realized the problem that we had was, sure, there's a joke with eating coffee, but there's really a gap there for college students, specifically with us at the time, that, healthy energy and keeping yourself energized when, you're working full time and you got to wake up early for your classes and all this stuff, rather than resorting to caffeine pills or Adderall or whatever else, a college student might do. Why not have a quick on-the-go energy bar that had caffeine in it? So that was the kind of the niche we wanted to get into and approach as we scaled. That startup count, the boot camp, demo day, we ended up winning because we gave everyone free samples and everyone liked them. So That was good. We got $500 burning a hole in our pocket, went to the supermarket, got more ingredients. And for the rest of that semester, we thought, let's make some more money. Just like we'd go to the library at 2 a.m. and sell it to people pulling all-nighters. And so we sold our first, few thousand bars that way in 2013. And it was just kind of something we were doing for fun. We didn't really think of it to turn into anything big, but it was just a good way to get some like side money and continue to like kind of test things out. We used to do things where we would like sell at different prices depending on what floor of the library we're on. Because on the 4th floor you can't speak up there, so you got to be really quiet. So we sold it for like $3 up there, and then on the 2nd floor where people were kind of moving around, we sold it for $2 to like test price sensitivity. So it was really very much like a learning thing for us at the time. And after that, year, both my co-founder and I went our separate ways. It was summer. He had like a study abroad thing, and I just went home and like got a job out here. And then when we returned, we thought like, can we actually turn this into something real? At the time, we were making the bars like literally in our dorm room, and it took us about an hour to make 10 bars. So it wasn't super scalable. We did eventually, and to kind of go to Jeff's question before, we piggybacked on this like cookie company and like used their space for a couple batches to help us like get some inventory to start off that semester. And that was helpful for us to like actually think about how do we scale this thing into something real. And with that, we used that batch to start selling to more cafes. And we kind of hit our first big roadblock that we didn't understand food science. So that was a bit, yeah.
Yeah. What did the bar taste like, and what were the ingredients that you were making in your dorm room? And aesthetically, did it look good? What was people's reactions?
Yeah. So that's some fun stuff in that, and with like the lack of understanding of food science, you might appreciate the story. So in the beginning we thought like, let's just make these taste really good. So we put like Nutella in them and like caramel, and they were very indulgent. They tasted great because there was a lot of sugar in it, and we didn't really understand like, what that translated to, because we didn't have nutrition facts. It was just like, the way we packaged them was we took like wax paper, we folded them up like a little present, put some Scotch tape on it, and then like put an Avery label with like coffee bar written on it. And like, that was essentially it. So it was very, very bare bones. And the part of the issue I'm about to get to is we didn't understand the like shelf life concerns. So when we were making them, we'd always put them in the fridge after, because we know you put food in the fridge. And because we baked them a little bit, so there was that kill step of making sure the moisture was lower. But we would put water in the recipe at the time to like make them more moist and chewy rather than like kind of crunchy and stuff. And we gave them to this VC who was like a connection, and then he put them on his desk on a Friday, came back on a Monday to open them up and like share them with everyone, and they were just green, like mold covered. Because that's just a lot of water activity in a food product. And so we realized then that we kind of had to scrap our recipe, the very tasty, indulgent thing, and start thinking about how do we make a scalable recipe we can get to manufacturing. So we basically stopped all operations at that point to like start actually like researching how do we create a food product like this. We spent the next like 3 to 6 months finding co-manufacturers, someone who can help us scale this, because we don't want to keep on making them in our dorm. And so we basically Google searched energy bar manufacturer and came across a few, had some initial phone calls to try to like play up that we were bigger and that there's this big concept that we were working on. And then basically they all said, how many SKUs do you have? SKUs are flavors, like how many different product lines? We just have one. All right, well, we're going to need at least 3. And then like, what are you thinking for your order size? And they basically would say, we only do 50,000 minimums. So like we'd have to somehow figure out how to sell off the bat like 150,000 units when we'd only sold maybe like 4,000 units at the time. So we realized we needed to find someone new. So after every single call of those, we basically asked for like an introduction. We figured, this manufacturer knows the industry. They must know other people. So with each one of those, we were able to get at least a couple introductions to some smaller manufacturers. And after probably like 50 different phone calls, we eventually found one in Spokane, Washington, that they were their own brand at the time, and they were transitioning to co-manufacturing with like their excess line time, and they were able to like squeeze us in for basically like a 7,000 bar order on one SKU. And so once we knew we had that, We sent them our formula that we had like fine-tuned and that was tasting good. We were happy with it. And then they sent us back like a iteration of it just to make sure that it was ready to scale, and it tasted horrible. And the thing that we realized then, going back to the food science, is that we were buying all of our ingredients from like Shaw's and Star Market, which is a retailer in the Northeast, but essentially think like Whole Foods or Vaughn's. And within each of those ingredients, when we put like Rice Crisps, right, we used like a natural Rice Krispie. And within that, there's like extra salt, there's extra sugar, there's other things. So it's not a raw ingredient that you'd find in a manufacturer. So we had to spend another 3 months basically in figuring out how do we make this recipe work with their ingredients rather than the ones we had used. So after basically a summer of doing that, then we were ready to launch on Kickstarter. So this is now about a year and a half in from when we had the initial joke in like February of 2013 to now July of 2014, where we have a manufacturer in place, we have a recipe we're ready to go with, and now we just need customers and money. So at the time, we pitched to our venture accelerator on campus to get a $10,000 grant to like pay for our first manufacturing one, which we were awarded, which is great, very helpful. It was equity free. So I think when you're in the beginning, like look for creative ways to finance your business rather than, trying to put it on credit cards or raising money way too early. There's plenty of grants out there, especially if you're a student, universities and like local groups. There's a lot of pitch competitions we did. We probably like raised maybe 150,000 just in pitch competitions over the course of our business, which is a great alternative way to finance things. So with the $10,000 grant, we were able to do our first pilot run at our manufacturing facility and then use that to go on Kickstarter, where we basically did a whole plan. And I can dive into Kickstarter if anyone wants the full download on it, but it's a crowdfunding site. We spent about 3 months prepping our campaign with like a few different ways we wanted to market it, with the goal of basically hitting at least 50% funded in the first 24 hours so we can kind of game their algorithm to be a popular project. And thankfully, we were fully funded in about 15 hours from all the work we did to kind of prep that. And we raised about 45,000 over the course of the campaign. So with that, we have customers, we're excited, the market and the product is kind of validated outside of, the library at Northeastern. And we were ready to kind of launch the business officially in January of 2015. And at the time, retail was really the only path we saw. Our website was a Facebook page, and we used, and I don't know if anyone's familiar with this product, but a Woofu form, which is basically like a type form that we like posted on our Facebook page that people can like fill out a form. And then if they wanted to order directly from us, and I would ride my skateboard around Boston delivering those products in like in the bag that we had. And then while I was doing that, I was selling to like local retail shops up and down the street in my off time. And so that first year with that retail strategy, we got to about 150 doors, like 150 stores, did about 100,000 in revenue. And that gave us like our first real validation to go out and raise some money. So I had an internship at the time at this startup, and I had told like the founders what I was working on, and they were like, "Wow, this is great. Like, let me make some introductions for you." And then from there, that kind of started snowballing into my first like real fundraising round. Our first check came from actually kind of like a random connection. And I think this small like offshoot story I'm about to say is just like, you never know where these kind of connections can come from. But I had been doing like a project with the law school to file for all of our trademarks, because another thing too is that we always ask for help from different parts of our university to like do something that we needed to do. The design of our packaging was done by some students in the design school. All of our trademarks were helped by law students in the law school and one of the law professors. And then we had like the business fraternity do our accounting. So like we kind of would always ask for help when we needed it. And since we were students and it was an interesting project, people were compelled to help us. So play the student card if you can. So Seren, that's to you. And then I think so going back to the story of our first like big check we got for $90,000, it came from basically I was in this law school class telling them about my business and then how I've applied for these trademarks and how I did it. And then there was another former alumni who was doing the same thing for his business. And then the law students were giving him recommendations on like how to file for trademarks. And he was like, all right, so do I need to get a lawyer? And the professor kind of jokingly said, "Oh, just have Johnny do it," because I had been filing all my trademarks. And so after that, we grabbed coffee. I showed him how to do it, and then he introduced me to his business partner, who ended up putting in our first check. And then so over the next 4 months, I basically spent time leveraging like the small amount of connections I had as a 19, 20-year-old at the time to try to like get more funds to close a round. And so it was basically a lot of angel investors, $25,000 checks that allowed me to raise our first 300,000 to kind of start moving down the path of retail and figuring that all out. So we ended up closing that round at the end of 2015. And with that, it allowed us to start working with our first big distributors. You'll get to part of this later that sounds great at the time, didn't end up being that great over time, but that'll come later in the story. So we went with Unify and KeHE, the big kahuna of natural food distribution. And as we started working with them, we quickly scaled from 150 stores to about 600 stores by the end of the next year. We had tripled our business. Things were going well in terms of a revenue standpoint. And then the following year, we doubled the doors. So we were in like close to about 1,200, 1,300 locations. We didn't grow as much in the revenue side. We did about like $500,000 that year. And what we started to realize was that the amount that we were spreading, we had spread so wide so quickly that we weren't supporting the stores that needed the support in the way that I was supporting them in Boston. In my first year of business, we really were in the store every weekend. We were pushing sales. I was demoing the product. I was communicating with customers and learning about how we continue to sell. But once we, started getting into like H-E-B in Texas and Rayleigh's in Northern California and Meijer in the Midwest, all these big chain retailers, I wasn't in the store. I wasn't pushing the product. We didn't have the sales team that was needed to devote to that. So we basically started to we got our first discontinuation from our first big retailer and realized this isn't good. We need to start changing our strategy. And so that was now in 2017, the beginning of 2017, we were starting to run out of cash. We were coming close to graduation. And so I had like $100,000 in student loans I needed to be concerned about. Potentially the business was about to go under. We weren't profitable. Our sales were still going up, but it wasn't actually like healthy sales. So that's when we kind of pivoted. We decided to go through a rebrand. At the time, we were called Newgrounds Foods Coffee Bars. And then a lot of our customers would call them Eat Your Coffee bars at the time. And we needed a more clear way to like have them pop on shelf. So we thought that was kind of a good way, did some surveys and decided to pivot the brand around that. And then we also decided to change our channel strategy. So retail is tough when you're working with Unify and KeHE and the other big distributors because they hit you with all these chargebacks that you can't dispute when you're small. So we started working with smaller distributors. We started to diversify with alternative channels around mostly office pantry because that's basically free business that you're not spending on marketing for. And so during that time, we were able to kind of reposition the business, get us to a more stable position, graduate. And then I spent that year basically closing a $2.5 million round to help us continue to scale down a path of this new direction that we were working on. And so we were excited. Things were going well. We just raised a bunch of money. We graduated. And we started to head down this path of office pantry. And we got about a couple hundred of those in the beginning. Sales were pumping well. We started to slim down our retail profile to focus more regionally on that. And then going into 2018, 2019, we started to reposition our products to better fit that office pantry business. And so we really wanted to put most of our eggs in this basket because it was extremely profitable. It was growing very quickly for us. And then once we fine-tuned the product around it, we were kind of off to the races. So in early 2019, we had launched a smaller format bar called the Snack Bite. It was 90 calories, a shot of espresso, no added sugar, fit everything else that we were looking for. And we were able to sell into distribution at under $1 so that it was a no-brainer for office managers to purchase it. And so we quickly went from a couple hundred of those to about 3,000 offices in the course of about 8 months. The business was on a tear. We were very excited about it. And then in March, COVID hit. And so quickly 70% of our revenue went to zero. And we had to kind of approach a new pivot to the business. And that's when we went to focus online. To date, we had only really sold on Amazon at that point. never really sold on our website. It's always just been like focusing on these external channels. And so we had to quickly kind of go into figuring out how to create an e-commerce business in March quickly. And so at that point, we made some tough decisions around, what do we do with our team? What do we do with like, how do we get money in the door again? And then how do we, make sure this is scalable? And basically at the time, we weren't certain that we'd be able to get our e-commerce business to a good spot in such a short amount of time. We realized we ended up actually doing fairly well with it. Like this year, we should finish at around like 350,000 just on e-commerce after having nothing in that channel. So it was a good year for that. But we decided to basically start moving towards selling the business at the time. And so now I spent the past 6 months essentially, courting different investors, snack companies, coffee companies, private equity groups, and have had probably over 150 different conversations with these individuals to get to this point. And now I've gotten everything from, it's a tough time to be selling a business and like people trying to take advantage to people understanding, but it's not quite a fit, we're too small, to now we've got a few offers on the table that we're trying to court through and figure out which direction we want to head into the new year, and how that's going to affect my co-founder and I, our shareholders, and all that stuff. So that is more or less the story from beginning to where we are now. There's a lot of things I didn't fully touch on in there, like managing a team and figuring that out when you're 20 years old and you've got like a sales guy who's in his 50s. When we decided to take the company remote to have a more flexible lifestyle, and how we've been a remote company for 2 years. And that was actually pretty great for us, when COVID hit, because we were already comfortable with working remotely. So a lot of things I can touch on. I can dive deeper into the fundraising rounds and any of that. And even in the sale process, if anyone's curious about how I've been managing the sale process. But happy to answer any questions.
So I want to start here because there was something interesting about the way that you spoke that struck me. I think you spent a lot more time talking about your failures than you did your successes. And some of your successes have been pretty big, especially as young as you are. But what is it about the failures that are valuable?
Yeah, I think so. With our business, we've had to pivot probably 3 times and really change our business model entirely 3 times. And within each of those, we had to like look deeply within all of the hypotheses we had prior to like that direction we head down, because every single thing we did, we thought through extensively. We had said, yes, let's like look at retail. This is how, Cliff Bar say like grew from the beginning. So why won't it work for us? We model it out. We know we need to work with these retailers. We need these turns, and let's go ahead with it. So, and then when it didn't work, why didn't it work? And then we had to really think through the why of that and how we can move forward in a better way. And each one of those times, with our first pivot, we cut away from retail. We cut about 80% of our revenue, knowing that we were going to do that in order to move down this better path that was more profitable. It led to a much more sustainable business for us, and would eventually afford us the ability to go back to retail eventually when we had more stability. And then on this time, it was less our choice and more of just the factor of the time of needing to pivot into e-commerce, where we could have more control over our business. So I think the thing is, like, you realize as you're going through it that, you can think through everything as deeply as you want, but you just gotta go out and do it. And then once you do it, then you can adjust course and pivot as you need. But it's one of those things where you learn as you go, and that's like the biggest part of it. And that you can't just throw up your hands when things are difficult, because we definitely could have just thrown up our hands in March, April, and said like, well, our business is gone, and sorry, investors, that like we're not going to be able to do anything here. But there were a lot of opportunities if you just think a little more creatively and try to figure out a path forward, rather than get frustrated and or just defeated from the process.
So that constant experimenting, trying new things, not getting discouraged, learning from it, trying something else.
Exactly.
Good. How much? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry if I interrupt. Hi, my name is Ralph. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm actually particularly fascinated at the moment with equity crowdfunding, and this is something that Johnny might want to think. If you've obviously done Kickstarter, that's very nice. What's important is, unless you are desperate to get out of the business immediately, what is great is that you have a great story, and a great story that includes perseverance. What you might want to very seriously consider is that with equity crowdfunding, especially starting next year in February or so, the Reg CF has gone from 1 to 5 million. This is important in the sense that from a fundraising point of view, the idea of getting funding on favorable terms, together with potentially thousands of ultimately typically small investors, but who are likely to become brand evangelists and customers, is something that should really stand out in your mind as a viable way to get substantial funding that can later, ironically enough, lead to a relatively early exit, but on very good terms. So anyway, I just wanted to put that in there in the sense that you seem to be a great candidate for just that sort of thing.
No, that's great. Yeah, no, it's definitely something we've thought about before, and in this timing, I don't know why it didn't come across my mind, but definitely a good thing that we'll be considering. Because yeah, I mean, raising a bit more money during this time to help us kind of pan through it could be good. And I think it's just a matter of finding the right opportunity. Do you know of any good places that you've worked with or know of in terms of equity crowdfunding sources?
I actually happened to track all of the campaigns because I happened to have one of the first campaigns on the first day that it was legal. Albeit only for 2 days because it was cannabis related, too early. But regardless of that, Start Engine, Republic, and WeFunder would be the ones to look at. Especially tomorrow, I think Start Engine may have a thing with Kevin O'Leary, one of the sharks from Shark Tank, who's joined them on a kind of PR version, I guess. That's you can register that at startengine.com, I believe. And I don't work for them, so I'm not endorsing it.
You're not going to get a commission check soon?
No, I'm afraid not. But what is really cool is that they just at the end of October launched a secondary market. What that means, in effect, is that if you took the right direction, and especially where you've already been, it is not just a question of raising potentially a rather substantial amount of money with an awful lot of supporters who, however, could be a single entry on your cap table. What is even more important is that normally investors don't really see anything unless there are two occurrences, an IPO or an acquisition. Oh, well, isn't that something? In your case, in other words, if you had a successful campaign, but still fundamentally want to aim towards an exit, in effect, that would be, for the shareholders, ironically enough, a marvelous opportunity to get funds back for their investment, as it were. So
thank you for that.
Yeah,
I think
I'll back them up. I'm on Republic, WeFunder, and Start Engine. I've used them all. From an investor's perspective, they make it very easy to invest too. And the new Reg CF rules could really potentially be game changers for the way that startups get their capital. Back to your capital, it's interesting to me that the first couple of the first fundings you had seemed to be from non-dilutive sources, from the university and then from competitions. How much did you raise from competitions? 150,000?
Yeah. So there's a bunch in the country that you can go to. So the great thing about it is you get to travel and you get to meet other student entrepreneurs all around. Like we did one that was in Kansas City. That was a lot of fun. We had one that was in Chicago. What was the other one? We had one in Minnesota. So I've got to see a lot of various parts of the country, learn about a lot of interesting businesses that other young founders were doing. And there's quite a bit of prize money involved in those. Our biggest check was 50,000, so that made up most of it. But there's a lot of $5,000 to $25,000 prizes that we got.
So a lot of it wasn't necessarily winning. It was being first. It was participating and getting a prize.
Well, so it's you have to be first to get the prize money.
Okay.
But first, second, third, like typically. But so we had a good pitch. We had a good story. We actually had traction because a lot of the student pitches are typically like concepts and or like they had just started. But at that time we had, anywhere between like 250,000 to like 400,000 in revenue as we were pitching at these competitions. So that was already like an eye opener for a lot of the judges, and they were like, wow, this is a validated business. And so it allowed us to be able to raise some capital through that, especially during the kind of the 2017 period when we needed additional money to kind of get through it.
Your early equity investors, did the fact that you had raised so much money from non-dilutive sources, did that make a difference to them when they decided to invest?
So a lot of it was actually over the course of time. So some of it came before, some came after. But the Kickstarter was definitely a big boost for us in terms of raising money. It showed validation across a lot of different, a lot of different groups and everything. So that like we had 1,000 backers who were already like pre-ordered and ready to go with the product. So that definitely was good validation in terms of raising money from investors.
So I looked up your Kickstarter campaign. I think I found it. It's from 2017.
That was a different one. So we did a second one to launch the rebrand. And that was just kind of like a quick one we did just as a good way to announce it.
Newgrounds. Okay.
Yeah. Newgrounds Food was the original name of the company.
Is it okay if I put them up? Is that too embarrassing?
No, you can. Feel free.
So this is the first one. Is this it?
That's it. That's the original product photography we try to take.
Is that a date?
That is a date. Yeah. So that's basically all the ingredients.
It almost looks like a finger.
Yeah.
So it looks pretty good. How much did you raise here?
45,000 basically. Yeah.
Okay. From 1,000 backers. Very cool. And what kind of perks did you give out?
Basically just like ordering X amount of bars. We did some other weird ones where you had like a 3D printed coffee mug that had a bite out of it and like a few other things, but sorry about that. Yeah.
That's very cool. And then this is, let's take a real quick look at the second one, because I want people to look at the difference in the artwork and in, so how much longer was it after you did the rebrand?
So this was to announce the rebrand. So it was less on like, we didn't really need the money, so we didn't put too much like marketing time behind it. It was mostly just like a fun way for us to tell the story and like explain why we were changing the brand name. And we thought it was a good way to like roll it out to leverage our community in that way.
So, but it's an interesting way to use Kickstarter because you're basically people are paying you to get the word out.
Exactly. That was our thought. It was basically it allows us to leverage a great community to explain kind of what was going on with the business and why we were changing. And so.
And the rebrand, this new design came from your fellow students,
No. So the original one did. This one's professional. So we had like a design firm do this one for us.
How do you get the caffeine in it? Is it grounded coffee or is it?
Yeah. So it's just grounded coffee.
Check the texture. It's fine.
It does. So it did in the beginning. We've modified the formula quite a bit to help mask both the texture of the coffee and the bitterness. So we do a blend of roasted coffee and green coffee, and then some other like flavor components that help us avoid that. And so it's kind of our proprietary Eat Your Coffee caffeine blend. But yeah, some slight iterations to it. But it's all real direct trade organic coffee essentially.
So you may have. We have a question in the chat box.
Yeah.
Were you worried about the big bar brands or existing brands copying you?
So not entirely. We kind of were to a degree, and the way we helped like build a moat around ourselves was kind of what I was alluding to before of like trademarks. So I went to basically trademark everything I could around the concept of eating coffee. So we have about like 30 trademarks that help protect us. Everything from a bitten coffee mug to a bitten coffee bean to Eat Your Coffee to a cup of coffee in every bar. 1 bar equals 1 cup of coffee. All these different slogans, insignias, brand names is what we did. And then we figured at that point, if any of those big companies try to get into it, they're going to have a tough time branding it. And even if they do, then they're going to have to use some weird obscure name that's not going to fully do it or just describe it as a caffeine bar. which isn't, which is fine. They can do that, but that just shows that extra validation for the market that we were creating, essentially.
That's a really interesting point that I hadn't thought of, because it's something that consumer goods companies all struggle with. Is it's easy to copy, but trademarking the daylights out of your brand, and that's what a founder will tell you is it's all about the brand, but generating that kind of IP is super important.
And finally, trademarks is not as hard or difficult as you'd think. It's just a form online, and you can go through it in that way.
So did you do that yourself?
Yeah. So obviously, I had help from the law school. I went to them to like help me file my first one, and then from there, I was able to do everything after that.
Yeah.
A different question for me. It's interesting that you sell on a very niche channel, the pantries. How did that come about? Was it you guys went after it, or it just popped up? Was it serendipitous, and how you thought about it and developed it?
Definitely. So it's a great channel. Obviously, right now it's horrible because no one's in offices, unfortunately. But with the time, we started working with this vending operator for a lot of offices, and we started seeing really good business with them. It was kind of through a mutual connection, that they were starting their vending operation, and we had our snacks, and they thought it'd be a good fit. So we got into our first couple hundred offices through them, and we kept it going like that. We weren't able to put too much behind it because of our bars at the time were a little bit bigger, so the price point was higher, and it was harder to get in that channel, because you got to look at when you're dealing with Facebook and Google and all those big tech companies that do buy a ton of snacks for their employees. They're giving them to them for free. So they're budget conscious. So that's when we decided to launch that smaller format bar, which is when we were able to make a conscious effort around it and really expand our footprint in that channel. So it's great because you don't have to deal with UNFI, KeHE, all these large distributors that will take huge chargebacks. And then on top of that, you don't have to create very expensive marketing programs to help support sales, because you just sell it to them. You sell it to them at a reduced rate, obviously, so the gross margin is lower, but your net margin is basically the same as your gross, because you don't have to spend any marketing behind it. So you're just shipping samples, they get eaten for free. All these employees enjoy them, and they get to talk about it with their friends and hopefully support the rest of your business. So that was the reason behind that pivot.
So we're coming up on our hour. We have time for a few more questions, though. And any other questions?
I have a quick question for Johnny.
Yeah.
You said you work with direct trade. Do you work with actual producers in specific countries, or do you work with a roaster that specifically roasts to your needs, that fits your programs, and then you use those products? And how do you do that part?
Yeah, so we partner with a roaster, and basically our thought there was when we were starting out, we were in between classes and we had jobs and we had other things we were doing. So to go and establish the relationships and give back to the communities that we wanted to in that way wasn't going to be possible for us. So we figured, let's find an expert that is already doing that and be a good customer to them and support their mission. So that's how we went about it. We've sourced from various coffee roasters over the years. Definitely cycling through different ones and different nonprofits that you can source from, but all with the goal of always sourcing direct trade, because it's much better than fair trade in terms of the ability to make sure that the money goes to the farmers and can fund, community-based initiatives that, in a lot of times, are also backed by the communities, where they're co-investing in it and making sure that it's providing long-term growth for them, and then that it's organic. So those are kind of our main two parameters of how we source our partners. But that's always been kind of at our core, was knowing we're not going to be the ones that are going to be able to go and build that infrastructure ourselves, but there are a lot of people doing it that we can support through purchasing coffee from them.
Have you been part of the Specialty Coffee Association, the trade organization? Before?
We've gone to the shows a couple times, but not just to walk the show and spectate and meet people, but never as an exhibitor.
Yeah, if you ever need any help networking within specialty coffee, I'll be able to help you out with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience? I've got a few more. Okay, I'll go. First, listening to your story, it's hard for me to believe that you didn't realize you were an entrepreneur when you were young, or that you were thinking about another career path. Where in this story did the light bulb come on that this is what I was meant to do? Was it getting the C in the financial accounting course, or was it taking an entrepreneurship course, or was it just sitting around with your friends dreaming up ideas?
Yeah. So growing up, like I always did little things to like make money that were just kind of on the side that I didn't really think about as entrepreneurship. I thought it was just like a kid with a lemonade stand or a bake sale, or, you know, I like made some longboards for like my friends like senior year because I wanted a longboard and I couldn't like afford to go get one from like the cool brand company. So I like made my own, and then my friends wanted some. So like little things like that where I was just being creative and wanted to make stuff. And I didn't really think of that as entrepreneurship because I don't know, just didn't tick
in
my head.
hindsight, now you can see it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, in hindsight, I can see like where all the things that lined up for what I like to do. And then it really wasn't until Northeastern and like the community that I had around me there that showed that there's a clear path here that I could take around having a successful, you know, career, life, whatever you want to say, and do things that I thoroughly enjoy, have a passion for, solve problems, and not ever have to like, you know, sit in front of an Excel spreadsheet for 14 hours a day at Morgan Stanley, you know, rather than doing that. So that was probably my freshman year that it really ticked.
Yeah, so it's probably a little bit of a process of elimination too. You experiment a little bit with careers and learn what you don't want to do.
Exactly, and that was a cool thing to plug for. I know this is Cal Lutheran, so I don't step on any toes.
That's okay.
But Northeastern's got a cool program called the Co-op program, where like we can take 6 months off to like work on some like work at a company. It's usually like an internship of some sort in between semesters. So my first one was at a cool startup where I was able to raise some money from the founders of there, and like they introduced me to their community. And then for my next two, I was able to use my co-op to work on my own business. So it was like those kinds of things where they're very supportive of that. And it shows, you know, in terms of you guys at Cal Lutheran and this kind of thing, that you guys are supportive for that as well. So
yeah,
lots of opportunities to do that.
We'll make note of that one. That sounds like a really interesting program. And then a last question. So you're thinking about, you're working on a sale, and you might be moving on from Eat Your Coffee, your first baby, relatively soon. Have you given any thought into what comes next?
Yeah, I've got a lot of fun ideas. My co-founder and I are ready to move on to the next one in terms of like our own things. There's a couple of the offers that we're debating between. There's a chance we're tied into the business for a little while. So there's a chance we're just working under new ownership for a little bit. But in the chance we go with the ones that we aren't, and we're just kind of consulting for a transition period, you know, we're probably going to take a couple months off, relax for a little bit. And then after that, we've got some ideas, not in food. I think one thing we don't want to do again is expiring inventory, avoiding that. But we've got some interesting ideas in the whole like technology around the food space, leveraging everything we learned to help support entrepreneurs that are trying to do what we did and help them avoid the mistakes we made. And then some other ideas in real estate, because I've been doing that a little bit on the side for a while now. So to be able to kind of poke more into that realm of the world could be interesting for me. And I saw the question come through from VSolve It. So I definitely am careful about how I voice our interests in like what when we're talking with you know, investors, private equity companies, snack companies, depending on who I'm talking with, about how we want to approach it. And generally what I'll say is like, we're open to being flexible here when it comes to the transition. Our goals is that, you know, we're young founders. This is our first business. We want to make sure that it succeeds and gets into the right hands. So, and make sure that the transition is a smooth one. So if it means we're on for 3 months, if it means we're on for a year, we're open to it. And so I try to do that instead of saying like, we're ready to move on. So it's a different, I gauge the conversation before I really say my true intentions.
Excellent. About brings us to our hour. Johnny, thank you so much for that. That was a wonderful story, very inspirational, and we wish you the best. And
thank you.
You're always welcome to stop by Hub 101 when you're in town. Hopefully, I hate to say this, I hope you can go back to Boston soon.
Oh no, that's long gone at this point.
Okay.
I'm stuck in LA now for good, I think. But my parents won't let me go back.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you at Hub 101 sometime soon, as we would all of you, to be able to do this in person again. That concludes our entrepreneur speaker series for the fall semester. We'll be announcing our speakers for the spring, January through April. I think we might do one in May if we're all going to be online, but we'll announce that later this month, and we hope to see you all at future sessions. Thank you very much for coming. Have a great holiday.